When I was 10, my dad used to tell me that honesty was everything. He'd kneel down, look me straight in the eye, and say, "Son, no matter what happens, tell the truth. Lies will eat you alive." I used to believe him until I found out he'd been living one giant lie for nearly 15 years. That realization hit me the night I accidentally opened the wrong photo album on our family laptop, a folder labeled 2011 Chicago trip. We've never been to Chicago. The pictures weren't of us. They showed my dad, smiling, relaxed, happy, standing next to a woman I didn't know. And next to her were two kids. One looked about my age. The other was younger, maybe 7. Dad had his arm around them like they were his real family. That's when everything fell apart. At first, I thought it had to be some kind of mix-up. Maybe co-workers, maybe cousins. But my gut was screaming no. So I copied the folder to my flash drive and closed the laptop quietly, my hands shaking. The rest of the night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing my dad's voice, "Lies will eat you alive." The next morning, I tried acting normal. My mom was making breakfast, humming some old 80s tune, and Dad was reading the newspaper like always. He didn't even look at me when I walked in. Just said, "Morning, champ." It hit me, that casual tone, that calm face, how good he was at pretending. Like he'd been doing it for years. I started noticing things I'd never questioned before. His business trips every other month. The random phone calls he took outside. The second phone I once saw in his car console, which he said was for work. And suddenly, all those weird details started connecting like puzzle pieces I didn't want to finish. Still, I needed proof. Something solid. So a week later, when he left his office bag in the living room, I snooped. Yeah, I know it's wrong, but so is having a secret family. Inside, I found a folded receipt, hotel charges from the Lakeside Inn, Chicago. Room for 2 adults, 2 kids. Dated just last month. I remember whispering to myself, "He's still seeing them." That was the moment the air left my lungs. For the next few days, I acted like everything was fine. I smiled, ate dinner, asked him about school. But every time he looked at me, I felt this heat in my chest, like guilt, anger, and disgust had melted together. He didn't deserve to call me his son. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. He said he had another conference trip, same city, same hotel chain. That night, after Mom went to bed, I took her phone and checked her Find My iPhone app. Dad's location showed up instantly, Chicago. Not near the business district, though. It was in a quiet neighborhood, near a small park and a bakery. I zoomed in and took a screenshot. Something inside me said, "Go see for yourself." I told Mom I was going to stay over at my best friend's house for the weekend. Instead, I took the early morning train to Chicago. I had $180 saved from my summer job and enough anger to power me the whole way there. I still remember stepping out of Union Station, the wind biting my face. I had no plan, just an address from that map screenshot. When I finally reached the street, my heart started pounding. There it was, a small yellow house with a white fence and a swing set in the yard. A car was parked outside. My dad's car. He was standing on the porch, laughing. Next to him was that same woman from the photos. And the 2 kids were running around, yelling, "Dad, Dad, come push me." That word, dad, it sounded wrong. It felt stolen. I don't know how long I stood there. I just froze. Then, before I could stop myself, I pulled out my phone and started recording. Later, when I got back home, I didn't say a word. Not that night, not the next day. But every time I looked at him, I saw that porch, that fake smile. And then came the cherry on top. He and Mom announced they were throwing a huge 25th wedding anniversary party. Family, friends, co-workers, everyone. Dad said, "We should celebrate our love, don't you think, honey?" "Yeah, let's celebrate your lies." That's when the idea hit me. If he could build a life on lies, I could tear it down with truth. I started planning, quietly, carefully. I went through old photos, copied messages, and printed screenshots. Then, I edited the video I'd filmed him with his other family. It wasn't revenge at first. It was truth. But the more I worked on it, the more it felt like justice. A week before the party, I almost told Mom, but something stopped me. She looked happy for once. Her eyes sparkled when she talked about the decorations and the song she'd picked for their dance. And that's when the guilt hit me like a truck, because I knew I was about to break her heart and maybe save her life. The night before the party, I didn't sleep. I kept replaying everything in my head, the laughter on that porch, the hotel receipt, the fake smiles. My stomach twisted every time I thought of how he'd hug Mom tomorrow, tell her he loved her, all while planning another weekend with his second family. No, he didn't get to do that anymore. So, on the morning of the anniversary, I woke up early, printed 20 copies of that picture, him with his other kids, tucked them inside envelopes labeled truth. I dropped one on every dinner table at the venue. When the party began, Everyone was glowing, music, laughter, champagne. Dad gave his big speech to my beautiful wife, my best friend, my soulmate. And that's when I felt it, a kind of calm I'd never felt before, because I knew what was coming. When the slideshow started, the one my cousin made for them, I slipped out and replaced the USB drive with mine. It started normal, their wedding photos, family trips, birthdays. Then came the final slide, a photo of him on that porch with them. The room went dead silent. Mom's champagne glass fell and shattered. Dad froze, his mouth open, eyes wide. I stood in the back, watching it all unfold. Then, softly, I said, just loud enough for him to hear, "Lies will eat you alive." The crowd started murmuring, and someone yelled, "What the hell, Mark?" Mom turned to look at me, her face pale, eyes full of tears, and then she looked at him. That's when I walked out. Didn't look back, didn't need to. The air inside the banquet hall felt heavy, like everyone was holding their breath at once. For a second, nobody moved. The projector still glowed with that frozen image of my dad, his arm around his other family, while my mom stood trembling under the spotlight. Then the whispers started. Is this real? Who are those kids? Oh my God. I could hear every voice, every gasp, every camera phone clicking. Dad took one hesitant step toward Mom, his face draining of color. "Sweetheart, please." She cut him off, her voice barely a whisper but sharp enough to slice through the noise. "Don't you sweetheart me." And just like that, she turned and walked straight out of the hall. I followed a few seconds later, my pulse racing so hard I could taste metal in my mouth. Outside, she was standing by the parking lot, shaking. The night air was cold, and her hands were trembling like leaves in wind. "Mom," I said softly. She turned, eyes glossy. "How long have you known?" I couldn't lie. "About a month." She inhaled sharply, her voice breaking. "You knew? And you didn't tell me?" That one hit harder than I expected. I didn't know how. "I wanted to protect you, but..." She looked away, wiping a tear. "Protect me? From what? The truth?" The worst part was, she wasn't angry at the lie itself. She was angry that I'd carried it alone. And she was right. A few minutes later, the hall doors opened, and Dad stumbled out. His tie was half loosened, his voice desperate. "Lisa, please, listen. It's not what you think." Mom spun on him, fury finally replacing heartbreak. "Not what I think," she shouted. "Those kids called you Dad, Mark." He flinched like she'd hit him. "It was a mistake I didn't plan. I stepped between them. You had 15 years to stop not planning, Dad." His eyes met mine. There was something behind them, shame, fear, maybe even relief that it was finally out. Then he whispered, "You shouldn't have done that, Evan." I felt the words crawl under my skin. "You shouldn't have lied." He opened his mouth, but Mom cut in again. "Go back inside. Tell everyone whatever story you want, but don't come home tonight." For once, he didn't argue. He just nodded slowly and walked away. When his car disappeared down the street, Mom leaned against me, sobbing quietly. All the anger I'd carried melted into guilt. I wrapped my arms around her, whispering, "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry." She just said, "We'll be okay. We have to be." But deep down, I wasn't sure either of us believed it yet. The next morning was brutal. The story spread through our family group chat faster than wildfire. My aunt called crying. My grandma texted, "Please tell me this isn't true." And then came the worst message of all, one from an unknown number. "Unknown, you didn't have to humiliate him." I froze. The profile photo was of a woman, the one from those Chicago pictures. I stared at the screen, my fingers shaking. "Me? Who is this?" "Unknown, you know who. You ruined our lives." I almost laughed. "Our lives?" "Me? He ruined them himself." "Unknown, you'll regret this." Then she blocked me. I sat there for a long minute, staring at the phone, feeling that strange mixture of anger and emptiness. I'd wanted justice. Instead, it felt like I'd lit a bomb and walked away before seeing who it hurt. That night, Mom barely spoke. She sat at the kitchen table, staring at a cup of tea gone cold. I wanted to say something, anything, but nothing felt right. So I just sat across from her, silent. The clock ticked louder than usual. Finally, she said, "You did what he taught you, tell the truth." Her voice cracked. I just wish the truth didn't hurt this much. Outside, it started raining. For the first time in my life, our house didn't feel like home. It had been 4 days since the anniversary. 4 days since the truth detonated and scattered our lives like glass. Mom hadn't gone back to work. She'd spent most of her time cleaning things that were already clean, like if she kept scrubbing, she could erase what he'd done. Then, that Saturday morning, a car I didn't recognize pulled into our driveway, a white sedan. And when the door opened, I knew exactly who she was. The woman from the photos. The one who sent me that text. She looked tired, like she hadn't slept either. Her hair was damp from the rain, and she clutched a cheap bouquet of supermarket flowers. Mom came to the window just as I opened the door. Her eyes widened. Is that her? I nodded. Yeah. Mom's lips pressed into a line. Let her in. Inside, the air felt charged, like before a thunderstorm. The woman stepped across the threshold and said, I'm Renee. Mom didn't offer a handshake. Of course you are. Renee looked between us, her voice shaky but polite. I just wanted to talk. I didn't know he was still married. Mom gave a sharp, humorless laugh. You expect me to believe that? Renee's chin lifted. Believe what you want. But when I met Mark, he told me he was divorced. He said you left him. For a moment, even I forgot to breathe. Mom's face drained of color. He told you what? Renee nodded slowly. He said you couldn't handle his travel schedule, that you took your son and moved away. He said he'd tried to rebuild his life. Mom blinked hard, tears forming again, but this time they were angry tears. God, he even lied to you. Renee's voice broke. I wouldn't have stayed if I'd known. I swear. The kids, they call him Dad. Mom interrupted. You think that just happened? Renee winced. He wanted that. He said he didn't want them growing up without a father figure. I finally stepped in. So, you never thought it was weird he could only visit twice a month? Renee looked at me. He said he was traveling for work. Same excuse he used here, I guess. The silence that followed was suffocating. 3 people, 1 man's lies, and 2 families stitched together with deceit. Then Renee reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. I didn't come here to fight. I came to give you this. Inside were photographs, newer ones. Dad at a birthday party, laughing beside her kids. And in the background, a cake with candles shaped like a 7 and a 9. I realized her children were just a few years younger than I was when he started seeing her. Those are from last month, she said quietly. He's been trying to call me since the party, but I blocked him. I thought you deserved to see the truth from my side too. Mom's voice softened, almost a whisper. Thank you. Renee looked relieved, like she'd been bracing for a slap that never came. I didn't know about you or your son. I wish I had. Maybe I could have stopped all this. Mom stared at the photos again. We were married 25 years. He told you he was divorced. He told me he was at conferences. She laughed bitterly. Guess he was just not the kind you register for. For the first time, Renee smiled faintly through her tears. Guess not. I watched the 2 women, my mother and his other partner, share the same pain from opposite sides of the same lie. And weirdly, I didn't feel hate anymore, just exhaustion. Renee stood up, straightened her coat. I'm sorry for showing up. I needed to see that you were real, that he was real. Mom nodded slowly. We both were. He's the only fake thing here. They shook hands, awkward, hesitant, but genuine. Then Renee looked at me. You're brave. You know that? Most people wouldn't have exposed him. I shrugged. Brave or stupid? Still not sure which. She gave a small smile. Sometimes those are the same thing. Then she left. For a long while, Mom just stood there, staring at the wet driveway. Then she said, almost to herself, he built 2 lies and ended up with none. That night, she finally slept. And for the first time since everything blew up, the house felt quiet, not peaceful yet, but quiet. He came home 3 days later. No warning, no text, just the sound of the front door unlocking like nothing had happened. I was sitting in the living room with Mom, both of us watching a rerun on mute, more out of habit than interest. The moment I heard the key turn, my whole body went cold. He walked in wearing that same navy jacket he wore at the anniversary party, still trying to look like the respectable husband and father everyone thought he was. When he saw us sitting there, he froze. For the first time in my life, my dad didn't have that calm, composed look. He looked small. Hey, he started quietly. Can we talk? Mom didn't even look at him. You should be talking to your lawyer. He sighed, dropped his bag near the door, and rubbed his face. I deserve that. But please, Lisa, just 5 minutes. Let me explain. Mom crossed her arms. Explain what? The lies? The second family? The photos? Take your pick. He turned toward me instead. Ethan, I didn't mean for you to find out like that. I was going to. When? Dad, I cut him off. Before or after your other kids started calling you Grandpa someday? He winced, like the word burned. I made mistakes. Mistakes? Mom snapped. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary, not having one with 2 women at once. His voice cracked. Lisa, I never stopped loving you. Mom actually laughed. It wasn't bitter, it was hollow. You loved yourself, Mark. You just loved seeing how long you could play both sides before it blew up. He started pacing, that restless, guilty energy radiating off him. I didn't plan any of this, alright? It started years ago when work got hard, and you were so busy with Ethan's school and your mom's illness. I felt neglected, she said, standing now. Go on, say it. The classic excuse. He hesitated. I felt unseen. Renee listened. She made me feel needed again. I stood up too, shaking my head. You were needed here, Dad. You just didn't like the kind of work it took. He looked at me, eyes wet. You don't understand what it's like being pulled in 2 directions. Oh, I understand perfectly, I said. You just pulled the trigger on both. He slumped into a chair, rubbing his temples. I thought I could handle it. I thought if I kept both parts separate, no one would get hurt. Mom's voice softened for the first time, and yet everyone did. He looked up. Renee came here, didn't she? Yeah, Mom said. She showed me the photos. She said you told her I left you. He closed his eyes, ashamed. I didn't know how to tell her the truth. She'd have left me. Mom's voice rose again. So you let her build a life on lies. You let me sleep beside you while you were fathering someone else's kids. He covered his face with his hands. I know. God, I know. For a while, no one spoke. The rain outside started again, tapping against the windows like the world was listening in. Finally, Mom took a deep breath and said, you can stay here tonight, on the couch. Tomorrow, you call your lawyer. He looked up, desperate. Lisa, please. She cut him off. Don't. You made your choice years ago. You just didn't have the guts to admit it until now. Then she turned and walked upstairs. I stayed behind, watching him crumble into the couch. He looked older than I'd ever seen him. Not just tired, defeated. He whispered, almost to himself, you must hate me. I sat on the opposite end of the couch. I don't hate you, I said quietly, but I don't respect you anymore. He nodded slowly, like he'd been waiting to hear that. I deserve that. After a long silence, I asked, why didn't you just leave Mom? Why not be honest? He looked at the floor. Because I wanted both worlds. I wanted the comfort of family and the thrill of something new. And I convinced myself I could have both if I just worked hard enough to keep them apart. I exhaled through my nose. You weren't working hard. You were juggling lies. He didn't argue. Then, almost as if remembering, he said, I saw what you did at the party. I glanced at him. Yeah? His mouth twitched in a half smile. You really went for the jugular. Someone had to, I said. He nodded. You're more like me than you think. That hit me like a punch. I stood immediately. Don't ever say that. He looked startled. Ethan. No, I said, my voice shaking. You don't get to make me your reflection. I'm nothing like you. Then I walked away, up the stairs, and shut my door before he could say another word. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound in the house, the creak of the floorboards, the hum of the fridge, reminded me that he was still here. The man who used to be my hero was now just a stranger sleeping under our roof. I kept replaying everything in my head. His excuses, his voice breaking, the way Mom looked at him like a ghost. Somewhere between midnight and dawn, I decided something. If he wanted both lives, he could finally have neither. The morning after the confrontation felt eerily calm. No shouting, no tears, just the silence that settles after a storm wrecks everything in its path. Mom was sitting at the kitchen table, a mug of untouched coffee in front of her. She wasn't crying anymore. She looked clear, like she'd finally made peace with the war inside her. Dad's suitcase sat by the front door, the same one he'd used for business trips. Only this time, it wasn't coming back with him. He walked in quietly, wearing a faded t-shirt and that lost expression again. For a moment, I almost pitied him, the way a person pities a once proud house now half collapsed. Mom looked up first. Your lawyer called. He nodded slowly. Yeah, I signed the papers. Good, she said simply. He hesitated, looking between us like he wanted to say more, but couldn't find words that wouldn't break him further. I'll move in with my brother for now, he said. Mom didn't reply. She just sipped her cold coffee. Then he turned to me. Ethan, I know I don't have the right to ask for anything, but please, don't cut me out completely. I looked at him, my chest tight but my mind steady. Dad, you didn't just lie to Mom. You lied to me. You taught me to be honest, to respect people, and then you became the example of what not to be. He flinched. I know. I'll talk to you, I said finally, but not as your son right now. As someone who's trying to understand how people become strangers to themselves. He nodded, eyes glistening. That's more than I deserve. Mom stood up then, her chair scraping softly against the tile. Mark, you should go, before this turns into another apology loop. He grabbed his suitcase, hesitated one last time, then stepped out the door. The sound of it closing felt like an exhale the whole house had been holding for years. For weeks after that, the house felt lighter but quieter. No more pretending. No more fake smiles at dinner. Mom started seeing a therapist, someone she could talk to without worrying about judgment. She said it helped her hear her own thoughts again. I started journaling, something I hadn't done since middle school. Every night, I'd write about what forgiveness really meant. Not the kind where you let someone back in, but the kind where you stop letting them rent space in your head. That's when everything began to shift. One night, Mom came into my room holding an old photo, the three of us at a lake, years ago. Dad's arm around her, me in a sun hat, grinning with a missing front tooth. I used to think that was the happiest day of my life, she said softly. Now I realize it was just the calm before the deception. I looked at the photo and then back at her. Do you regret staying so long? She thought about it. No, I regret thinking love could fix cowardice. That line stuck with me for days. A week later, something unexpected happened. Renee, the other woman, called. Her voice was trembling. Ethan, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to hang up. Another part wanted answers. She continued. He told me you and your mom left him years ago. He said he was rebuilding. I found out the truth when my sister showed me the video from the party. I had no idea. Her voice cracked. He lied to me, too. I sighed. Yeah, he lied to everyone. I left him, she said quietly. I couldn't live like that anymore. There was silence for a few beats before she whispered. I just wanted you to know you did the right thing. When she hung up, I sat there staring at my phone, realizing something heavy. The truth didn't just destroy one life, it freed 3. Months passed. Mom started painting again, something she hadn't done since before I was born. The colors she used changed, from grays and browns to soft yellows and blues. One afternoon, she showed me a new canvas. It was a woman standing in the rain, holding an umbrella made of glass. Fragile, but beautiful. She smiled. It's called transparency. I laughed softly. Fitting. Yeah, she said. It feels good to finally see through everything. As for Dad, he still calls sometimes. Mostly short, awkward conversations. Updates about work, or how he's trying to be better. I don't hate him. I just don't see him the same way anymore. He used to be the man I looked up to. Now he's the man I learned from, just not in the way either of us expected. Sometimes, when I think about everything, I realize this. Some truths don't just set you free. They rebuild you. The night I exposed my dad at that anniversary party, I thought I was destroying my family. But really, I was saving it, the version that deserved to survive. And that's how I learned that sometimes, justice isn't loud. It's just finally telling the truth out loud.